a lot.
They don't pull over for me.
I know, it's
20 years
terrible.
ago. Yeah, but now
Yeah.
he said the same thing too. He says it's becoming very
Yeah, there's upsides and downsides for sure, but there's certainly in terms of I was first here in the late '90s in college, and it's just been a lot more growth in the restaurants and the kind of stuff that makes the city fun to be in and be young and everything.
I was here in 1995, and 14 for you did not look like that.
Oh no, it was like bombed out basically.
Yeah, it did not.
There. Ah, okay, thanks.
It's still, there's still
Kind of shootings over there. It's kind of blocked by block. It's like one of the only so affordable places in the city.
And it's like another country. I was like, wow, this is America.
Yeah, I know, right? Oh, it's okay. She's big for her age. What's she like? 5, 6 months? Yeah, she's 6 months.
6 months. Okay, you're a big girl. Pediatricians, we love that.
Gold happening here.
Thank you. Now it's on.
Oh, big smile.
Okay, everyone, we'll get started now. It's all right. Sorry for the delay. I want to thank everyone for coming. I want to welcome all the participants here to our second Stroller Brigade for Safer Chemicals. So welcome. When we last came together, it was a little over a year ago, this group galvanized the first vote in Congress on reforming our toxic chemical laws in 36 years. So it was a major achievement. And that bill was the Safe Chemicals Act. It got through the Environment Committee, the first vote in Congress in 36 years, but didn't make it all the way through. This year, as we come together, we have a different bill in front of us, legislation called the Chemical Safety Improvement Act. But there's a twist this time. It's bipartisan legislation, but it wouldn't do the job. It wouldn't actually protect the public from toxic chemicals. And Safer Chemicals, Healthy Families came together. It's 450 organizations and businesses that represent millions of people. And we came together to reform our laws to have protections that meaningfully protect the public and the environment from toxic chemicals. And that's what we're doing here today. That's what we're holding out for. That's what we're waiting for. It's worth noting that science and medicine are on our side. Every mainstream organization of doctors and scientists has concluded that unregulated chemicals contribute to the burden of illness and disease in this country. They've also largely agreed on what it means to protect the public from chemicals, what kinds of policies, what kinds of standards you need. And unfortunately, we don't see their recommendations, those standards, in the legislation before Congress. And we're here to insist that change. We're here to insist that the legislation before Congress be changed to meaningfully protect public health from toxic chemicals. It's important that Congress gets this done, but it's even more important that they get it done right. And that's what we're here to insist on, is get this done right. Because if we don't protect the public from toxic chemicals, then reform really isn't worth doing. So with that, I want to begin our order of speakers. Our first speaker is Dr. Yolanda White. She's a pediatrician from Atlanta, who's come all the way up here from Atlanta, and who has worked on these issues for a number of years. Dr. White.
Hello, everyone. So I am a pediatrician and a member of the National Medical Association, the leading professional organization for African American physicians. I'm so grateful to be here and participate in this year's Stroller Brigade because this gives me an opportunity to speak on behalf of millions of children, especially the ones who are here today, who are vulnerable to the impacts of toxic chemicals. Babies are exposed to toxic chemicals as they're developing in the womb, and from the first moments they enter this world. According to the Centers for Disease Control, they have biomonitoring studies that are showing that almost every pregnant woman has toxic chemicals in her blood. Children come into contact with toxic chemicals from any variety of products, from their cribs to their mattresses to the toys and plastics to any number of items. And there's a well-established body of research that shows cause for concern. And there are tens of thousands more chemicals that are used in consumer products that have never been tested before because of our weak, outdated federal laws. Most parents are unaware of the risks associated with these toxic chemicals because there are no warnings, cautions, or advisories. Even as a pediatrician, it's hard for me to advise parents on how and where to avoid toxic chemicals because they're everywhere. This is why I'm so passionate about protecting our children. They are the least protected and the most affected. They are the most susceptible because they have a much different anatomy, they have a different physiology, and they also have a different metabolism. Children can absorb more chemicals through their skin when compared to adults. They also breathe in more and swallow more chemicals than adults on a per body weight basis. And their brain, kidneys, and other organs are still in development, so they're mostly overwhelmed. So even trace amounts, even small doses of chemical exposures can have lifelong consequences. And I'm excited to see a wealth of support from the medical community, as Andy mentioned, who are speaking out on this important issue of updating our federal laws on toxic chemicals. And some of these organizations include the National Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, Physicians for Social Responsibility, the American Nurses Association, and the American Public Health Association. Most recently, a joint statement was just issued by the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists and the American Society of Reproductive Medicine, which raised concerns about our inability to properly advise patients on toxic chemicals. And this statement also highlighted a very important issue about environmental injustices and disproportionate exposures to vulnerable populations, communities of color, and those of low income who live near industrial or chemical manufacturing facilities have a higher rate of exposure to these toxic chemicals. And we must do all we can to protect these hotspot communities and recognize that these disproportionate impacts do exist. As a pediatrician and a consumer, I recognize this issue is vast, which is why I'm looking forward to working with our members of Congress to craft a meaningful reform of our toxic chemical laws, which have not been reformed since I was 3 years old. The current bill, the Chemical Safety Improvement Act, however, does not meet the recommendations of the medical organizations that I mentioned, and therefore would not in its current form provide the basic public health protections that we need right here, right now. So it's now time for us to make sure that our laws and public policies are strong enough to adequately protect children and generations to come and all other vulnerable groups, because it's all about prevention. And if we can prevent exposures to toxic chemicals, then we must do it. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Dr. White. In addition to having science and medicine and doctors and scientists on our side, one of the major things we have on our side is moms, as you can see here. Moms around the country. Yeah. In the real world, the doctors and the moms are winning. The real world outside of Washington, where informed mom activism has already convinced the marketplace to change, with major announcements in the last couple of weeks from Walmart and from Target to restrict the toxic chemicals in the products that they sell. And really, Congress is almost the last holdout in the entire country that hasn't gotten the message of the need to restrict toxic chemicals. And so we're very excited that we have an activist mom with us here, Sarah Chieffo, who's with the League of Conservation Voters, and her daughter Stella. The League of Conservation Voters is the leading political voice for the environmental movement, and we're very excited to have Sarah here. So thank you.
Good morning. It's an honor to be here today. My name is Sarah Chieffo, as Andy said, and I'm the Legislative Director at the League of Conservation Voters. We're a proud member of the Safer Chemicals Healthy Families Coalition. I'm also a new mom to 6-month-old Stella. I'm a new mom who's very concerned about levels of toxic chemical exposure for both myself and for my daughter. Before becoming a mom, I thought I knew about the potentially dangerous chemicals lurking in the products that we use every day. For years, I've tried to do my best by buying green or natural products. I thought I was doing enough to make sure I wasn't exposed to toxic chemicals, but I was wrong. As you just heard from our esteemed healthcare professional, nearly all pregnant women in the United States have several different chemicals, toxic chemicals in their bloodstream. You see, even being a somewhat informed consumer, I simply couldn't shop my way around this problem. Dangerous chemicals are all around us. They're in our couches, they're in our carpets, they're in our electronics, they're even in the receipt that I get from the organic grocery store. It's simply unacceptable that the exposure I suffered when pregnant could have harmed my baby before I even heard her first cry. It's unacceptable that dangerous chemicals are in a disturbing number of children's products that aren't labeled without any warnings. Recent product testing conducted by the Ecology Center and the Center for Health, Environment, and Justice found levels of phthalates, a chemical linked with infertility and birth defects, in products that I simply never would have imagined. A SpongeBob SquarePants rain poncho, you'll see, vinyl flooring, both tested positive for dangerous levels of phthalates. Now Stella is on the verge of crawling. Huge motivation for her parents to keep our floors much cleaner, but there's nothing I could do to protect her from the actual flooring. I could be exposed to harmful chemicals when I'm using a few precious moments during nap time to get in some exercise with the dumbbells. I'll go out for an afternoon walk, I put in my earbuds, I talk to grandma, I'm exposed to toxic chemicals. It's simply unacceptable. These are a few small but all too real examples of how we may be exposing ourselves each and every day to toxic chemicals, despite our best efforts. As a parent, it is difficult and frankly scary to know that I can't protect my child from being exposed to harmful chemicals. The problem is simply too big for me or for any of us to tackle on our own. Now, as you heard, there is a law in the books, the Toxic Substances Control Act, that should be protecting our children from toxic chemicals, but it's outdated and badly broken. That's right, Stella. It's outdated and badly broken. Littlest activist here. I'm proud to be standing with all of the women and children and dads and behind me, calling on Congress to reform the Toxic Substances Control Act in a meaningful way that finally gives the Environmental Protection Agency the authority it desperately needs to take action against dangerous chemicals. At LCV, we will continue to work with every senator willing to fight for public health, particularly the health of the smallest and most vulnerable. Now, we know from our work across the country that this issue rises above partisan politics. Worried moms from both sides of the aisle are calling on Congress for meaningful chemical policy reform today. I'm inspired by all the work of the coalition, by all the work of those standing behind me, and we stand shoulder to shoulder with moms, dads, and concerned citizens all across the country that are demanding protection from toxic chemicals for Stella and for all of our children. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And I'm sorry I mispronounced your last name. I have a hard last name myself. So it's Chifo. Yeah. Well, sometimes activist moms happen to have major careers in show business. So our next speaker is someone who, in spite of being famous, actually came to this issue the same way that Sarah and other people, millions of women around the country have, which is having a child and then realizing that a lot of the things that you bring into your home or that your child comes in contact with have actually not been evaluated for their safety to make sure that the children are protected. And so it's my great pleasure to introduce our very effective spokesperson, actor, and star of the large and the small screen, Jennifer Beals.
Thank you, Andy. The bells are ringing.
That's right.
It's a pleasure to be here among such inspiring and energizing advocates. And like many of you, I started my journey in the quest for strong laws on toxic chemicals because, quite simply, I am a mother, and I am tired of feeling like I have to have a PhD in toxic